I can ask you to grab a seat. There's plenty available down here on this side at the front if you are on the search for one. And welcome back to the post-coffee pre-lunch session, as I like to call it. And this is our session on big global brands, the big players, what they're doing and how they do it. Over the next hour or so, we're going to examine how some of these brands use sport as part of their wider marketing mix. And we really do have a stellar lineup for you. We'll shortly be joined by executives from Bacardi, Unicef and Huawei. But first we're going to focus on a well-known brand, indeed, one of the world's leading car manufacturers, but one which is in the first season of a new long-term partnership with one of the world's great sports properties, the UEFA Champions League. Nissan agreed a deal with UEFA, European soccer's governing body, in April and took up its slot, effectively replacing Ford as a Champions League partner in August. So how did it all come together, and what's the rationale behind a deal on this scale for a brand like Nissan? To tell us, delighted to welcome to the stage Gareth Dunsmore, the General Manager of Marketing Communications at Nissan Europe, and Mark Bullingham, Managing Director EMEA of Fuse Sport and Entertainment, who are working with Nissan on activating the partnership. Gentlemen, welcome. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. So Nissan, what is Nissan doing sponsoring the UEFA Champions League? I think I want to try and give you a bit of background first of all about who we are, who myself and Mark are, and what we have to do with the UEFA Champions League partnership, and why as a brand this was really important to us and part of our strategic direction going forward. So the UEFA Champions League partnership is 4 years, started this August, and we're very, very pleased to take over and run this partnership for the next 4 years. I myself was leading the bid team from Nissan in Europe, but on a global basis, and I think that was really key for us. We really wanted to do something with the Champions League that would last for 4 years from a global perspective, because we believe that's powerful a property. And we did this together. This is myself, Gareth Dunsmore. I did this together with my partner at Fuse, Mark Bullingham. Mark, if you'd like to say a few words.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. Some of you might not have heard of Fuse. We've only been around for 5 years. Very quickly, part of Omnicom, about 180 people around Europe, and we help 10 of the top 30 brands in the world really figure out what to do in this area. I'm really delighted to work with Nissan. As Gareth said, we worked together over the last 3 or 4 years. We figured out a very clear global strategy of which properties we'd like to acquire, what would be the consistent activation theme to pull them all together. And clearly, Champions League was really the jewel in the crown of that. So we'll give you a bit more information on that today.
So Nissan, I think the thing, everyone knows Nissan, we said one of the leading automotive brands, but for us, Nissan is something that is perhaps unknown in terms of what we stand for, especially in Europe. Over the last couple of years, Interbrand has said we've been growing as a brand. We're now in the top 50 brands globally in terms of our brand value. That's incredibly important to us, and it's something we don't want to hold back on, and we want to drive forward further. In the last year or so, we've launched 10 cars, and launching 10 cars in a 12-month period is not something any automotive brand has done in Europe before. And it's meant that we focus very, very strongly on launching those cars and telling people about our products and our services that we offer with those products. But we haven't really spent enough time and enough money talking to people about what we stand for and about what our brand stands for, so that when they're looking at buying a car, they're thinking, I want to buy a car from Nissan, rather than I want to buy a Qashqai or a Leaf, which is 2 of our most famous products that we have on the market at the moment. In the next few years, we have an objective to hit, and this is something we've announced globally. It's called Power 88. It's about 8% market share and 8% operating profit. Now, that's our global direction. At the moment, we're around about 5% for both of them. That's something that is an incredible step forward for us as a brand. We're not going to deliver that without brand power, without a stronger, healthier brand that allow us to sell more profitable cars, and it allow us to make sure that when we launch an awful lot of products, we're doing that within a healthier brand so that we can spend less money on each of the individual cars we're selling and each of the individual cars we're marketing, and more money on talking to customers about what we stand for. And really, why are we doing that? Because if you're going to buy a car, it's the second biggest purchase that you'll make in your life. Yeah, buying a house, us Brits buy houses. Most of Europe sadly don't, but us Brits buy houses, and we also buy cars, thankfully still. To do that, though, people say when you ask them, why did you buy that car? It's because of the price, it's because it's got this technology, it's because of the design. But deep down, it's actually because they have some sort of affinity for a particular brand. Otherwise, and I'm a big fan of this overall brand in general, otherwise everyone would buy a Skoda, not a VW, because deep down they are the same car, they have the same technology, they have the same engineering teams building them, but more people buy a VW and people pay more money for a VW than a Skoda. So it's about people's affinity and love for that brand. So we wanted to really try and cultivate that love and that understanding of what Nissan stands for. And Champions League is a really great property to do that, because people absolutely, obviously, are passionate about that particular moment, about that particular brand. I think the other thing that I like about the Champions League and about sports sponsorship and sports in general is that live sports will always captivate an audience. Live sports are going to fight against, for the long term, connected TVs, people skipping adverts, moving on to their iPads, making a cup of tea. Live sports is a thing that will stop people walking away to make that cup of tea, stop people flicking through the adverts. And as a brand, if you partner with live sports, as Adidas showed earlier, you have that opportunity to build a deeper connection with your audience. So the UEFA Champions League was what we chose, as Mark discussed. We had a long-term looking at the different properties. We're not just doing UEFA Champions League, though. As a global brand, we're also partner of Rio 2016 in the next Olympics. We're partner of other activities around the world, including the British Olympic Association here in the UK. And there's a reason for that. That live sporting, as I say, is absolutely fundamental for us. When we looked at the Champions League, the other thing that we felt that was important is a level of premiumness that it offers. And football in general is a fantastic opportunity, but every brand is in football. You know, there is no differentiation you can have just by being in football. But with the UEFA Champions League, we had that ability to perhaps step out of the crowd and really show that level of premiumness. Our brand is about innovation and excitement for everyone. And I think if you asked everyone in the room before I put this slide up, what does Nissan stand for, probably no one would have said this. And you know, I'm fairly honest about that. But over the next few years, hopefully, people will start to realise that Nissan is putting a lot of effort into the innovation in their products, but to deliver more driving excitement for their customers. But who are our customers? We're a much more inclusive, we're a much more accessible brand than the majority of brands that are successful in Europe, and we want that accessibility to remain, to work on a global basis. So we came up with a particular strategy for the UEFA Champions League partnership. We wanted to have something that delivered a level of consistency over the next 4 years. It's the biggest annual sporting event, and that annual ability, the fact that it's on around 10 months of every single year, is incredibly important to us. It gives us that ability to build familiarity with the Nissan brand. But if we chopped and changed our message every single month, every single week, or worse, every single day when we talk through the Champions League, I think we wouldn't actually deliver on our objectives of building that familiarity with Nissan and building that greater brand opinion. So we came up with something that we felt mirrored nicely between what we do as Nissan and what the UEFA Champions League do themselves. And really the innovation that we put in and where football meet is through these engineers of excitement. We engineer excitement in our cars, hopefully. If you've driven some of our cars like the GTR, like the Nissan Leaf, hopefully you'll see that. But more importantly, footballers engineer excitement on the pitch. That was where we tried to position ourselves in our creative that we're producing. So to do that, we partnered up because, again, Nissan coming into football, why are we doing that? What has Nissan got to do with football? We wanted to partner up with certain ambassadors. So we went beyond just badging on the stadium. We went beyond the perimeter boards, beyond just putting car ads in the bumpers. And we partnered up to begin the season with Andres Iniesta and Thiago Silva. Unfortunately, Thiago Silva didn't lift the World Cup. It was a little bit of a punt on that one that he would, but okay. I think he's still a phenomenally strong asset in the UEFA Champions League and obviously an incredible player for PSG. On top of that, Andres Iniesta, one of the most famous European footballers, has still very, very strong presence in Barca. So bringing these people together, bringing them into our advertising, and we'll have a look at our brake bumpers in a moment, was really strong for us. Yes, it allowed us to push our message across in a credible way that football fans would actually frankly give a damn about, rather than just putting our cars up there. But it also gives us an ability to talk socially. Adidas talked very well about how they activated the World Cup from a social perspective. At the Paris Motor Show, Thiago came on our stand. It had a look at one of our Nismo products, our sports car products, and loved it so much he took a photo of his son sitting next to the car and tweeted it. And it allowed us to be the #1 socially talked about brand at the Paris Motor Show. The Paris Motor Show is the world's biggest motor show. It's a phenomenal event. Every brand is there. You had Volvo with the likes of Zlatan. Very, very strong from a PR perspective for them. But what we'd managed to deliver with working with Thiago as a brand ambassador, as our engineer of excitement, was that additional social reach, which I think is really important to us. On top, we've just announced working with Yaya Toure. We're also partners with the City Group at a global level, and Yaya Toure is one of their stars at Man City. And on top, a chap called Max Meyer. Now, Max Meyer, probably in this room, no one knows him, but for us, one of the other things that's important about the Champions League, it has that global presence, but it has the ability very quickly to go down to a local level. And any partnership that we look at, we're really trying to look at how we can activate that at a grassroots level. And Max Meyer plays for Schalke. It brings us into Germany, which for a non-German automotive player, is a very difficult thing to do, is to activate your brand in a market where essentially only 20% of people would consider buying a non-German make. So by having that partnership there, it allows us to really get into things in a deeper way. I've got a quick couple of videos to show you how one of the ways we've pulled these players in our brake bumpers with the purpose of trying to get people to remember us. And I think at the end of 4 years, hopefully we'll continue, but at the end of 4 years, what we want to make sure people are saying is, wow, we would actually miss Nissan if they left to be sponsor of the Champions League. Which might or might not work.
Looks good.
I think I cursed videos. We'll try it again. Short clip, but then if you imagine watching the broadcast sponsorship, you get these 10 seconds, sometimes only 6 seconds to talk about things, but then we follow it up each time. So again, from a social perspective, because we don't want to just stop there, we want to create something that creates a bit of reaction. There's 1 or 2 smiles or maybe frowns, I'm not sure, in the room, but hopefully you could understand that these guys were challenging each other and sparring with each other. Thankfully, they also then played. Unfortunately, Thiago was injured, but one of the first games was PSG versus Barca in the leagues. We were lucky with that. It's a really great opportunity for us to activate socially as well, get them tweeting against each other, get them challenging each other, following up from the brake bumpers that you saw there. On top of that, we worked together with Mark on a property called Goal of the Week, where we worked with UEFA to bring added value to our fans, to the people watching, or to the Champions League fans, I should say, from Nissan, so that we are remembered. If I pass over to Mark, he's going to take you through what we've done there with Goal of the Week.
Thanks, Gareth. Yeah, I think, obviously, Gareth said that we wanted to be in a situation where fans would really recognise we were adding value to them, breaking down barriers. And there were a lot of things going on with UEFA. We worked with them a lot, and also with Team. The content rules being relaxed a little bit for 15 to 18, sponsors getting access to content a little bit earlier after the games. We thought, well, hang on, we've got a really good opportunity here to create something that will allow fans for the first time to be really part of picking an official award. So we've got Goal of the Week, and we've got a short video that will explain what it is in a second. The reason it's so critical for us is it gives us a unique asset, something that we can own, something that we can really use to build online audiences, to fuel all of Nissan's social media. And this is an explanation, if it works.
Nissan innovation and football excitement are colliding to create an integrated campaign celebrating the genius of the game. Our engineers of excitement examine the data behind the best goals in the Champions League to visualize what makes fans jump out of their seats. In the Goal of the Week digital experience, a specially designed algorithm analyzes every goal and identifies genius contenders who will be put to a weekly vote. Users can watch highlights from the match and explore the data behind them. They'll see how excitement, tension, and difficulty come together to create a 3D object unique to each goal. Once a user decides their chosen genius, they can vote for a chance to win prizes, like tickets to a Champions League match. Goal of the Week, coming soon to a device near you.
Okay, that just explains a little bit about our exclusive asset there. And we've used that, actually, whilst it's a global asset, we run it on a national basis, and it enables all the regions to really have local campaigns, have national communication. That's working very well, although early days. Just a couple more points. Champions League, as everyone knows, is global, and it gives you such a strong platform to really hit in so many different parts of the world. You know, the interest in China, in Brazil, is phenomenal. And we've been working with all the markets there to build out local programs, and it's really starting to make a strong impact there on external audiences and internal as well. I mean, often people overlook that, but it's been really powerful for that. Just finish our quick intro, say we're at the beginning of a journey, and you know, whilst we worked on it a long time before actually negotiating, we had a very clear activation plan. Of course, now things are evolving. We're taking advantage of opportunities that are out there and adapting the plan, and I think it'll be a 4-year journey. Well, we've got a few more things in the pipeline, and we'll continue to build the excitement over the years to come.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Grab a seat. We'll let's drill into this a little bit more. I'm going to go in the middle.
Okay.
So, thank you very much, first of all, for the presentation. Very informative stuff, and obviously a very big project, again, with sort of several layers to it. One thing just very quickly to pick up on, you mentioned it at the end there. Internally, how is this being used by Nissan at the moment, and what are the plans to maybe roll out a bit more internal staff engagement going forward in the years to come?
It's interesting. I mean, Nissan has got, hopefully some know that we've the biggest manufacturer of cars in the UK. We've also got plants in Sunderland, St. Petersburg and in Barcelona. And, you know, trying to motivate a factory workforce and that are actually sitting there building cars, bringing these cars to market is incredibly difficult. They don't sit behind PC screens. You don't have massive access to them to showcase what you want to, you know, your internal messaging. They're on a line. They're on shifts, and they go home at night. But if they're going home at night, they're sitting there watching the Champions League, and they're incredibly passionate. If you think about Sunderland, okay, they're not in the Champions League, but an incredible footballing city. Barcelona stands for itself, but also in Russia and St. Petersburg, they're crazy about it, and it gives us the ability to talk to them away from their workstations, which they don't have. Then we're also with Goal of the Week. We've rolled that out internally so they can access it on their mobile phone at home, access it on their iPads, and actually enter a specific staff competition to win tickets to games in their area or to win tickets to the final as well. So we're putting a lot of effort, rather than just giving these tickets that we obviously access and purchase to fans and to business partners. We also do that internally as well. On top, though, it's just trying to remind people of what we're trying to do as a brand. And for years and years and years, the only internal communication has been about the next car we're launching. And now we're talking about where we're trying to head as an overall brand. And Champions League is a massive statement for Nissan internally to try and motivate people and sort of build that internal loyalty as well.
We'll ask for any questions in just one moment, but I like nitty gritty. I like getting into the detail stuff. So the Engineers of Excitement tagline. Talk me through how that came together, how many ideas were rejected, how many people were involved, and if there is one person, who came up with the one
Sure.
that ticked all the boxes.
Shall I lead on this one? Basically,
Depends what you're going to say.
Yeah, well,
Or was it wasn't you?
See where we go.
Yeah.
Wasn't me. No, the way we work with Nissan is there's an Omnicom team that actually comes together with all the creative agencies, and actually every Omnicom and beyond Omnicom agency that works together with Nissan on a retained basis. And the way we work with all these projects is very much collaboratively, sitting down together with a clear brief from the client, and actually client being very involved in that, and working through what the positioning should be, how it reflects obviously the global strategy that we came up with 3 years ago, but also how it reflects in terms of local market requirements and the overall marketing plan as well. So it's a very much an iterative process through that, and I think quite early on we all realised that it was a very simple way of linking football and the Nissan brand, and it had so much potential. So I'd say we settled on the area relatively early, and we're still continuing to flesh it out. I don't know if you want to...
Yeah, I mean, for me, the other thing perhaps of interest to people is there's always an interesting two-stage process for things like this. You have the first stage where everyone's excited and motivated and you're bidding for something, but you're just making stuff up that's not real at the end of the day. You're trying to win something rather than actually delivering something into someone's mobile phone or in a stadium. And what's been nice with this process is the mindset and the mentality has stayed consistent all the way through. So what we promised we would do in the pitch, I think we're now trying to deliver on that. From a creative messaging perspective, as well as a scale perspective of what we promised to go globally. You mentioned about the one person. I think there's a lot of crazy ideas. It came from a Dutch chap who has remained on the team and is a key driver of what we're trying to do for the long term. So
Good
certainly
stuff.
a passionate football fan.
Any questions for our Nissan case study team? We have a microphone coming from your left.
Hi, Jim Irving. I work for Delta Tray. We're actually a major partner of UEFA's. We're responsible for a lot of their technology delivery, including UEFA.com. I'm just interested, obviously, as Nissan being a new partner for Champions League, obviously there's a very established kind of sponsorship package that UEFA team have had in place for a number of years, and that obviously continues to evolve, which has often been, I think, seen as very innovative and market leading. I wondered how much of that was as part of your decision to decide to want to be a Champions League sponsor and kind of to work with UEFA and team in that way.
I think quite early on we've been speaking to team and UEFA for quite a long time in the run-up to this actual process. So building that relationship is quite key for a start. Our head office in Europe is actually in 5 minutes drive from Nyon, where UEFA is based. So you can build that relationship in a one-to-one way, which is very important to us. In terms of the actual package, where we got excited is the global side of things, rather than how innovative or where we could stretch it. I think we like to feel, and I think team are in the audience here today, but we like to feel we're challenging and we're trying to push the boundaries of what can be done. But the bit that got us excited from day one was the ability to talk to our customers and our fans in Mexico, in Singapore, in Australia, in the US even. It has that global reach, and no other European property had that at the right type of premiumness as well. So then I think as we got to grips, and as Mark and team and the UEFA guys and us started to work on this project, we found out more and more about the different ways we could stretch it. That's where Goal of the Week, for example, came in terms of one of the sole and exclusive packages. And I think whilst maybe they've been around for a while, to us as a brand, the sole and exclusive area for us to activate was really important. Making sure that we have our own space, our own area where we have the freedom to try and deliver something from Nissan to the UEFA Champions League fans, rather than just being one of a crowd. But Mark, anything?
No, I was just going to say the same thing. Yeah, the core rights obviously are really important, huge amount of value, and it's how you build on that really drives the commercial return. But as Gareth said, the sole and exclusives were really the critical area for us in terms of linking it back to the brand and also having a differentiated positioning. So absolutely, agree.
Mark and Gareth are going to stay with us as we expand out the panel and fill some more seats in a moment. But and there will be an opportunity at the end of the panel for more questions from you guys. But if anybody has another point pertaining to Nissan specifically, over here, we'll bring the microphone round to you.
Hi there. Excuse me. Hi there, Hugh Anderson from Wrightster. Gareth, you mentioned obviously that the football space is many brands competing in that, and you guys have developed and obviously created some really innovative ways of engaging with both your internal customers, your staff, and also creating your brand message around that. Who's been, in terms of brands and the likes of Ford and other brands in different categories, who's been your inspiration to help drive your innovation in your communications?
I wouldn't say another automotive brand. I think the automotive industry is quite, including the history of what we've done in Europe as ourselves as well, it's not innovative enough and it hasn't been customer focused enough. But Heineken, for me, are a phenomenal brand when they look at activating things. And it was very, I think, easy for us to get inspired by some of the stuff Heineken was doing with the UEFA Champions League, but beyond as well. Some of the stuff they did at the Sochi Olympics with their Heineken house. Really, really inspirational. I'm very, very focused on just trying to work with a small group of people, giving them an amazing experience, and then working out how to spread that to the world has been a really interesting way of approaching it. Because if you look at most automotive advertising, it's just pushing a message out there. Then it's also just about badging something, and we wanted to try and convince them internally. That was perhaps a hard discussion to have, but to convince ourselves internally that it was worth spending the money on making smaller, more dedicated fan experiences, such as the Goal of the Week, which is perhaps to a smaller audience than our bumpers might be. but that it was worthwhile investing as much on that as we do on the creative for our adverts, and then from there spreading that message. And Heineken do that really, really well. So the other brand from an automotive perspective that I admire, that I think we're trying to think about is, and I mentioned them in the intro, is VW, because they really try and talk to the heart and the brain at the same time with all of their advertising. Some of the activation I think is not well known, but a lot of the activation they do in Germany is really trying to do both and activating that way. So perhaps Germany, VW in Germany is a very different brand than they are outside of Germany. It's quite interesting to watch as well.
More question opportunities towards the end of the panel, but let's fill those seats with three more big global brands. Delighted to have executive representation from all three. So please join me in welcoming Andy Gibson, the President of Bacardi Global Brands, Nick Wiggin, the Vice President of Partnerships, including sponsorship and media at Huawei, and Tom Burstow, Head of Sports Programs at Unicef. Thank you for being with us, one and all. Andy, I want to start with you, President of Bacardi Global Brands, and this year, really, I suppose that has focused around the Martini brand and its return to Formula One. First of all, how's it gone?
Yeah, it's gone well. Williams have had a pretty good year.
Pretty remarkable year.
Very remarkable year. So look, the partnership's gone well. But we've got a portfolio of brands, Martini being one of them, and we actually don't start at sport, and we don't start at the brand. We actually start at the consumer, and we look at what passions, what interests do our consumers have that we could connect our brands through authentically to actually have our brands turn up and live authentically, excitedly, and in a real way, right through all the touch points that a consumer has daily. And of course, when you look at the Martini brand, you say motorsport has been at the heart of that brand forever. The founders, Martini and Rossi families, actually grew the brand from day one off the energy and the excitement of sport, of racing, not just motor racing, actually, all sorts of racing. So when we looked at, what are the passion points of our consumers, and the excitement and actually lifestyle of Formula One popped very, very highly, very early. It was an obvious choice for us. Let's bring the stripes back. Let's actually get back into the elite motorsport of F1. And then the choice between teams really fell out quite comfortably and quite naturally when the Williams team was available. As a founding team member, two families going way back in sport, it felt like the right thing.
Was it always the intention to go in as a title sponsor, or would you have considered going in perhaps in a smaller way with another team that might already have a title partner? Yeah,
I think that's a great question, and we looked at both. And then we said, Martini, it's the number 5 Italian brand in the world. This is a global icon. And we said that the brand itself deserves to go in at a major global level. So that sort of made the decision quite easy for us, really.
And we'll probably get on to talking about success of the thing you're sponsoring and the role that has with some of the other guys a little bit later. But you perhaps couldn't quite have imagined that the Williams team, which has been in the doldrums for several years really, would have come good in such a way. I mean, it seems to have all worked out rather beautifully for you.
Yeah, it has. It's been a beautiful storm. But look, luck plays a part, but it was an educated guess. When you look at the Williams team, they're foundational, the most winning team on the grid. The team that they've brought together this year to actually compete in the sport with the Mercedes power unit, it said if there was ever a chance, this was going to be the chance. And so luck, educated guess, but a coming together of two great brands that's worked out for us really well.
Has it changed the way that you activated the deal? Had you sort of planned things around perhaps a bit more of a building process, and that the team would be maybe in the midfield or even towards the back of the grid?
We actually didn't really get into the sport built on success on the grid. We're about the lifestyle of the sport. We're about the excitement, the celebrities, the glamour that surrounds the sport, which is where Martini lives. When Martini's good, it's got a swagger. And there's nothing like the F1 party coming to town to have people swagger. So we really did build our association off the lifestyle and the association with the lifestyle. Of course, success, exposure helps to build confidence and makes the investment look a whole lot more clever in hindsight. And what it means is next year we've got a lot more countries who are going to activate. It was primarily Europe this year. We'll have a lot more countries that are going to activate, and our programming will certainly become much bigger as the confidence behind what we've got grows.
Excellent. We'll come back to you in a moment, Andy. Nick, tell us about Huawei, because it's a name that a lot of people will be familiar with. Perhaps there will be some that aren't quite as familiar with it. Who are you, and what's the grand plan?
Thank you. Well, we're the third largest smartphone provider in the world. Surprises some people, but I think it's fair to say that, like you said, most people are aware of the brand now. And we're from China. We're a Chinese company, and we have global ambitions to become number one smartphone manufacturer in the world.
So this seems like classic challenger brand stuff, trying to internationalise. Is that how you view not just your activities in sport, but the whole marketing setup, marketing operation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we come from a rich heritage, from a network and infrastructure background. The consumer business is relatively new within Huawei, and consequently, the device business and our smartphones as well. So we know we're coming from a recent position in terms of consumer positioning, and certainly we've come out from behind the sun quite quickly. People are more aware of us now, and we certainly are competing for those positions 1 and 2, and obviously see a lot of parallels in sport, and in particular football.
Yeah, football. Quite a raft of deals announced over, the last 18 months or so. Yeah. Arsenal, AC Milan, Atletico Madrid, Paris Saint-Germain, Galatasaray, Santos. Tell us about how that all works in terms of your overarching strategy. What's the method behind picking certain territories and certain clubs?
Yeah, AC Milan and Ajax as well. Certainly we have a profile that we want to reach out to. And we want to associate ourselves with clubs that have a big presence, a solid fan base, that are aspiring for that number 1 position in their own local leagues. Plus, the presence, within Champions League is a bonus as well. I think our relationship with Atletico Madrid is, a classic example of how we as a brand have actually developed our football proposition. In fact, our relationship with Atletico Madrid goes back the longest. We have a Chinese business culture, which is very much a sort of step-by-step approach, and we trialled various on-shirt one-off game opportunities a couple of years ago, and really just sort of started that relationship until we recently, as our partners at Atletico Madrid said, we finally signed the deal and walked down the aisle together, and now we're on their shirts.
Excellent. Tom, Unicef, big global brand in its own right, but obviously coming at it from a slightly different angle, perhaps as a major charity, but nonetheless some key partnerships with major sports organisations and major events. Notably in the last few months, I suppose, with Glasgow 2014, the Commonwealth Games. Just tell us, first of all, what you did there, because it was quite a groundbreaking piece of activity.
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, Unicef, as you say, a global brand. We've been working in sport for a number of years now with a variety of top brands, both individual athletes who support us, from the Lionel Messi already mentioned this morning, David Beckham, Djokovic, various members of the sporting elite, along with a variety of clubs such as Man United, Barcelona, who everyone here will know about. Increasingly, I think as time has gone on, we've looked for opportunities where we can maximise the audience that is receiving our message, and also creating opportunities for that audience to truly engage with us. So particularly of interest to us to support us financially through donations. So this summer with the Glasgow 2014 Commonwealth Games, we created the opportunity to become the official charity partner, to actually really embed ourselves across that Games, but innovatively using the opening ceremony as a moment to reach out to that global audience, or that Commonwealth-wide audience, estimated at more than 1 billion people watching that opening ceremony moment. And interesting hearing Thomas talk earlier about the challenge of multi-sports events, and actually the opening ceremony being the moment where you have that focus of the world, or the Commonwealth in this case, on that event. So we used that opportunity to integrate our messages. So we showed a number of short films led by some of our leading ambassadors, such as Sachin Tendulkar and Chris Hoy, people like that, who really sort of portrayed the Unicef message and created a single unifying moment at which the watching audience could come together to support Unicef and our work. And we had no idea, quite frankly, how it was going to go in terms of a response. But incredibly, we raised £2.5 million within the first 40 minutes after that ask, just in the UK. So we recognised that there was a real engagement there with people with what we were trying to achieve. There was a real engagement with our brand and our activation of that through this event, and the opportunity there to create some real long-term support for what Unicef is trying to do around major sports events. So I think, we continue to look now at what are the opportunities where we can reach the largest audience, the sort of most depth, I suppose, of connection to us, and how we elongate that experience.
And just this week again at Celtic Park, actually, the Scotland versus England friendly, you rolled out something similar again.
We did. So we received a request from the Sierra Leonean Football Association to really support their activities to fight the Ebola crisis that's happening across West Africa at the moment. And so in a really short space of time, we were able to work with ITV, with Sky, with the Scottish FA and the English FA to create a moment within that game. As you said, it was a friendly match, so but a lot riding on the match itself. We had to look at how we could integrate our request and our support request of those watching into that moment. So we had something just before the match itself. We had a moment at half-time and a couple of mentions in the second half. And I think those, again, despite not just raising awareness, but we've raised around £700,000 from that request at the moment. So these are opportunities for us that demonstrate how sport can connect with a cause, the value that creates for sport, for the brands connected with those events, but clearly for us and most importantly for children.
When you're establishing these partnerships with sports organisations or individual teams or individual athletes, how are you balancing up the need to raise awareness of the Unicef brand and the work that it's doing with the actual fundraising that is clearly very vital?
It's a good question. We've had a number of associations for many years that perhaps on the face of it haven't generated a huge amount of income or the amount of income you might expect to associate with an organisation as large and as well known as they are. I think increasingly we're looking at how we work around that organisation, be it a federation or an individual, look at the relationships that they hold and look at the different channels. Unicef works across a variety of different channels to raise income, be that through sponsors, be that through government involvement in major events like the Glasgow Games, be that through wealthy individuals or through the general public. So increasingly we're exploring those different channels and the ways in which we can activate those channels, particularly given our global reach and the global respect we have for the brand, to ensure that we don't just raise awareness, which is fantastic for us, but we also generate the vital funds that we need to deliver for children.
Gareth and Mark, to bring it back to what Nissan is doing and to follow on really from one of the questions from the audience a little earlier. Nissan followed Ford, as I mentioned in my introduction, as a Champions League partner, and Ford had become part of the wallpaper really, for better or worse, over a couple of decades as a Champions League sponsor. Did you examine in any detail at all what they had done with their sponsorship, or was it clean sheet of paper from the start?
I think it's always important to be quite humble with these things, and we are respectful of the fact that Ford were there for 21, 22 years, and they built up a lot of credibility with that. Now, when you say for better or for worse, I think what Ford did incredibly well was activate their brand values through their advertising activity, where perhaps we looked at other brands much more, and I mentioned Heineken earlier, is the likes of Heineken, the likes of Adidas. You can't fail but to see what they're doing outside of just the 10 seconds, the 6-second spots. And that's where I think we paid a lot more attention and spent a lot more time, not just looking at UEFA and the UEFA Champions League, but also at things like the World Cup, things like the European Championships, things like the Premier League, the La Liga, seeing what brands are doing in those areas, in those football spaces. We're already a sponsor of the African Cup of Nations last time around, so we worked quite heavily with our global team as well to understand what they'd done successfully, what they'd learnt, and how to engage with football fans and provide that value. And I think that's what we tried to set ourselves out to do, but perhaps in a very different way, trying to express our brand values rather than copying what Ford have been doing before.
Mark, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I think that more or less covered everything. I mean, obviously you look at what people are doing in other sports around the world in related categories and in the automotive sector and try and build on the best practice. But at the end of the day, we did have a very clear strategy, and really the activation program is built on that strategy whilst taking the learnings, I think.
One thing that really, that really impressed me with another Nissan group, the North American team activated the NFL. They're not actually title sponsors of the NFL, but they do something called the Heisman Trophy, and really taking things away from what you're doing when you're watching it and giving some value back and activating something else outside of it. And the Heisman Trophy, for anyone who knows NFL, will know about it. And Nissan did a great job in the US, and I think that also inspired us to go beyond the minutes that you're watching on TV.
Andy, when you were plotting Martini's return to Formula One, and I'm not sure how long the negotiations were going on, but it was a deal that was only made public quite, I think only a few weeks before the start of the season this year, back in March. What had you looked at both in terms of existing Formula One sponsors and what your immediate rivals were doing across whichever sports that they were sponsoring or involved with?
Yeah, we looked right across the spectrum. I love the word humility. I think there's a lot of people doing a lot of good work out there, and I think you've got to look at what people are doing, look at what's working, look at how that might be relevant for your brand and your consumers. I think the key here, I said it a couple of times in my opening, it's got to be real. The brand's got to be able to own it. It's got to be able to do it. It's got to be something that consumers say, okay, I can see what the brand's doing and bringing to my experience in something I love. And I think if you can't bring something and value add the experience authentically in a way that people want to talk about, write about, get involved in, you shouldn't be doing it. So I think it is a case of looking at what others are doing, tipping your hat to what's working well, and working out if that's appropriate for you, or if there's something within that that you can bring to the sport, the consumer, that your brand can do authentically. I think today, more than any time in the world, consumers, they see through the veneer if it ain't something you can do and should be doing. And so I think it's got to form a conversation and a real want for the consumer to participate. And of course, we do that, across bars, across shops, 24 airports this year with replicas in. We actually had, the buggies that take people out to the gates. We put racing stripes on them and gave people free rides. And, we actually brought the brand to life in a really fun but true way for consumers. And, the good news is next year will be bigger and better, because we actually did conclude the deal reasonably late. So this year was a little bit of a scramble into what we can execute. But we've had tremendous learnings, and the plan's looking good for next year.
Mark, you said something interesting in the presentation, which was that the content rules were relaxed slightly by UEFA for this next sponsorship cycle. So you were able to get more access earlier to footage and presumably create work around that. maybe you could just flesh that out a little bit, because
Yeah,
I mean this content marketing, and perhaps once you've explained it, Andy, give us a sense of what it's like to do that in Formula One, where there is traditionally a fair amount of restriction on footage, rights, what you can and can't use.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like everyone, all brands are talking about content marketing, and clearly we're dealing with a lot of major consumer passion points that can really fuel that. I think the change from a UEFA point of view is that from 15 to 18, the partners will be able to get access to the footage earlier, 24 hours earlier, so actually after the midnight of the match on the Wednesday. And we saw that as a brilliant opportunity, really, because particularly when you look around the world, some of the ways that people engage in the Champions League, obviously in Asia, it's about waking up in the morning and checking out the highlights. Well, we can capitalise on that. We can get into that cycle of them checking out what's happened. So I think it really opened up a lot of opportunities for us. We went through a very extensive process of looking at what sole and exclusive assets we could create. And with that trend and the change, then the goal of the week was perfect to build on that, build on the Engineers of Excitement theme, and give people something that they'd never had the opportunity to get before.
Andy, I gave you a little time to ponder the question of use of footage, use of rights in and around Formula One. It's a tricky operation, I imagine.
It's tight, and it's tight for all good reason. The FOM guys protect their IP with an iron fist, and we knew that coming in. The important thing is we knew what we could and couldn't do coming in. You've got to respect the rights owners and their rules. And what we said actually is, I alluded to it earlier, we're actually not about the pits and the grease. We're actually about the lifestyle and the circus that surrounds Formula One, which people want to get involved in. So we're creating our own content. We want to have the hottest parties on any given weekend around the grid. We want people to want to be there and actually want to tweet and Instagram about their experience. We create our own martini terrazzas in cities where the Formula One's happening, which have become the place to go to and the place to be when you're at a race weekend and we're executing. We're looking at actually creating a documentary with the Williams family, which I think will be of huge interest to anyone who's interested in motorsport, because it's such a rich family history with such a story to tell. So we're clear where we can and can't go, and actually we're creating our own content around the desire that is around the track and that is the Martini brand.
Talking of hottest martini parties, I know we've got some martini cocktails later on at the drinks reception, so stick around. Nick.
Nice plug.
Nick, you're obviously working with a lot of different football clubs in different countries.
Yeah.
In terms of what you're doing to forge relationships with them, is that all down at a local level? And again, on this content issue and ability to access content, behind the scenes content, access to players, all that sort of stuff, is what are the challenges and opportunities that you're finding as you start to navigate these?
How can we sweat our assets?
Yes, yeah.
Well, before I answer that question, maybe I'd sort of just reflect a little bit on what was said before. I mean, we as a brand, we considered F1. It wasn't the right fit for us. We intentionally chose a football club strategy. We consider ourselves a challenger brand. We want to reach out to a broad consumer base, and we are very sensitive to the way that football fans, have a sort of polarized, engagement with their own club brands, and we intentionally wanted to be in that space because we're a new brand and we want to be disruptive. But we're also very conscious of how we use those assets locally as well as regionally and globally. Coming back to the asset portfolio that we have, we do go through a process of identifying which clubs we want to work with. Also, we have a sort of benchmarking tool and process. I'm sure most established brands do. So we have a similar range of assets that we're looking for to negotiate for with each club that we work with. And at the top of that list, for example, we've got sort of LED rights, shirt sponsorship and the like, and we're constantly trying to drive consistency But we use digital as a channel specifically because we think there's more scope to sweat the assets, if you like, in that environment. You know, it's a much more sort of personal media channel, and we can create a much better and closer relationship with our consumers through that channel. So we've intentionally tried to take the assets that we have available, image rights and so on, and really try and leverage that as much as we can within social media, within our online presence.
Tom, what was the process of forging the relationships that UNICEF forge? Is it, and in terms of what we're talking about, access to clubs, players, events, do the people you're talking to almost have or feel a moral obligation to sort of welcome you with open arms? How to what extent do you have to go out and sell the concept of a partnership?
Yeah, I think we clearly have to outline what we expect that partnership to deliver for all parties. I think, interestingly for us, our relationship in sport dates back probably 15 years plus, and a relationship started with Manchester United actually, and I think that relationship has developed over time enormously. And there's clearly a desire and an expectation on the part of our partners often that this will create a different space for them in terms of their brand, particularly those that are looking to further their brand values in particular markets, emerging markets or new markets for them. So clearly we can support in those areas, and I think people quite quickly understand that. I think another thing for us is about our increased opportunity of positioning brands alongside other brands with us at the heart of that. So I was with the All Blacks last week. I recently signed up with UNICEF to work with us internationally, and one of their big things is about positioning the All Blacks brand near or alongside other major sporting brands that UNICEF has associations with, so Manchester United or an FC Barcelona. So our ability to be able to connect and deliver those relationships, I suppose, as part of what we're doing, with our aim being that, how that supports children, I think is really powerful for those brands to really understand.
Can I pick up on that point? Just sort of working with partners. We see that as a trend that we want to embrace. We've been involved in various club partner workshops, and of course the clubs intentionally have brands from different sectors, so there's no sort of conflicts of interest there. And we're very interested in working with brands in the sports sector, in the other technology areas to work together pull in the same direction. Of course, from our point of view, we are a relatively new brand and we can learn a lot, but at the same time, we know what we're good at, particularly in the mobile space with our range of devices and the opportunity to preload content experiences within devices and use the mobile media channel itself. We're experts in that space, so that's attractive. I think a lot of the partners particularly in football and sport in general, can work together to pull in the right direction.
Perhaps we get a bit carried away sometimes, especially at gatherings like these, and think that sport is the be-all and end-all. Very simple question to you all. Where does sport fit in your brand's wider marketing mix? And perhaps we'll start with Andy and work across the line and end with Gareth.
Yeah, it's as I said earlier, we don't start with sport, we start with consumers. And clearly, motorsport racing at the elite level is what, and the lifestyle that surrounds that is what the Martini consumer is interested in. For Bacardi, for instance, music and music travel is what we're about. We just ran the Bacardi Triangle at a remote island 2 weeks ago, which I think we're up to 3.5 billion impressions at the moment out of that event, because that's what those consumers are passionate about. So that's where we start. And then for the Martini brand, motorsport, it becomes central. And it becomes your in-store, your in-bar, your at airport, so your commercial touch point, central vehicle to actually connect with your consumers. It becomes central in your communications. And, I truly believe down the track that consumer passion points and platforms that operate off them will be the core of any brand's communication strategy. And I don't think that day is far away. So from a Bacardi point of view, with the more pace we can move to, whatever that passion platform is, sport, music, lifestyle, Grey Goose is all about lifestyle, whatever that passion point is, the more central you can focus activity around that passion point, and the more consistently you can communicate with consumers through that passion point, the more bang for buck you're going to get, and the more clear your messaging's going to be.
Nick, how about you? Where does sport sit in what I presume is a much wider marketing attack?
Yeah, well, from a sponsorship perspective, we focus on driving demand for our products. That's and we use media to drive purchase consideration, and sport is certainly a focus area for us, and we've intentionally selected football. So the reason that I said earlier, it's disruptive, and it drives a high amount of passion within a certain segment. We're not spending at the levels of Samsung or Apple at the moment, but we're certainly driving the conversation. So we use football intentionally to do that during the season, and we look at alternatives in the off season. For example, some of our high-end devices, are very, very slim, very design-led, and we're very much looking into fashion and style, and using a similar social, digital media approach to announce our new products with these brand ambassadors from the design and the fashion part of the world. And we think that complements football. We've created some what we consider quite innovative, creative in the past, working with Paris Saint-Germain, Zlatan Ibrahimovic and his team, all suited and booted with our products, and we think that we can drive more interest and conversation about our brand when we associate our design-led products with those brand ambassadors.
Tom, what's the sport non-sport ratio at Unicef?
So we have two different ways of looking at sport really within our work. So firstly, we consider it from a programme perspective. So how does sport actively change the lives of children on the ground? So you throw a ball down anywhere in the world and children will come running and want to get involved. And that for us as a mechanism, as a tool to enable us to provide them with messages around education or health or whatever it might be is really powerful. So from that perspective, there's a very strong and growing understanding of what sport can do for children directly. I think in terms of partnerships, that understanding is growing. We have a huge number of themes, of campaigns, of channels, of audiences that we try and reach as Unicef, covering a multitude of things to do with children. So sport is one of those. But I think events like the Glasgow 2014 Commonwealth Games, the London Olympics, we had an involvement with the associations with people like Barcelona and Manchester United, are increasingly building the understanding internally of the opportunity that sport has to create new and bigger audiences. And I think that element of new is really powerful for us. So, typically audiences that follow sport are younger, more male, more digitally connected than the typical Unicef audience. So that creates an opportunity for us. I suppose the challenge for us in that is how do we communicate clearly to them in a way that will resonate and engage them with Unicef's work beyond sport. And so we've increasingly looked at a variety of strategies, and one that we're working on at the moment is something called Team Unicef. So that is bringing together the different assets that Unicef has, different supporters that Unicef has under one strategy to really combine their collective profile, their collective talent, their collective reach to do some amazing things for children. So we're looking to launch that next year. We think that could be a really powerful opportunity for those brands, those individuals, for Unicef itself, and of course then for children.
And on the Nissan side of things, you mentioned 8% market share, 8% sustainable corporate operating profit by, I think, 2016 is the plan. So obviously sport, as we saw, is a large component of that, but where does it sit against everything else that Nissan is doing in, again, what must be a fairly large marketing team?
Large marketing team, maybe not, but we get by. I think that in the past it didn't sit anywhere. We were there, we were pushing our message out predominantly TV and print led. And then over the last couple of years, I've tried to really change how we've done that and looked at, I think as Andy said, it looked at what our customers cared about, what they were interested in, and what was big enough to give us sort of one platform to bind everything together on. But where I'm most interested in what sport can do for us over the coming years is this idea and this mentality of live sport on TV, because it's going to become increasingly difficult to get our advertising across to our hopeful consumers in a traditional way with connected TV on the rise. And something like live sport attracts everyone in, and it doesn't just do it from a TV perspective, but it then allows me to go and work in individual countries and pull things down even as far as our local dealership. Whereas before, I would never be able to go into a dealer that sells my cars and talk to him about my latest TV ad. They wouldn't care. My father-in-law ran a dealership for 20 years in Germany, and the only time he's ever talked to me about my job at Nissan is when I announced to him that we were sponsoring the UEFA Champions League. Because he saw how amazing that could be, because he could walk into the local school, start sponsoring his school football team with a real reason and a way to connect that all the way up to the top property. And you can't do that with a traditional advertising campaign, but with sport, because of that passion, because of tapping into that passion point, you can very, very quickly. So an increasingly large focus, I think, to answer the question. It certainly wasn't there a couple of years ago, but now on a global basis, AFCON, Champions League, Rio, we're starting to expand in that area, and it is focused very much on those consumer passion points that we want to tap into.
Just to add to that, I mean, we've obviously got a lot of brands, and I think there are a lot of people in the room looking at this, and a lot of brands moving from more of an interruption model to an engagement model. And from our work, sport's probably about 50%, but we are completely platform agnostic, really. We start with the consumer, start with the brand, look at what's right for them in the overall landscape, and then create a solution that will help brands build that long-term relationship with their target audience. It's quite simple. You can't engage people through things they're not passionate about. More and more brands moving towards that, moving towards it from a content point of view. I think sport's brilliant from the point of view of big audiences. As Gareth said, still one of the last remaining appointments to view. And the ability of technology now to liaise with people on a one-to-one basis, or at least personalised basis, that's all perfect. I think the other trend, though, that people are starting to think about now is when you look at the modern age of celebrity, and you're looking at, particularly with millennials, and some of the surveys recently in the US, and who are the top 10 celebrities for millennials? Well, actually, only 3 of them are kind of Hollywood actors or actresses, and the other 7 are YouTubers. Well, okay, well, let's look at it from a sport point of view then. The social media audiences some of the top footballers have, or top sports stars have, then in their own right, they become huge brand ambassadors, and amazing potential to engage through their audiences as well. And you'll see that model, I think, becoming more and more powerful as brands. Okay, celebrities have always been in product endorsement and so on, but the more that they build their own audiences that brands can tap into, I think sport's in a great place for that as well.
Andy, I know you have to leave us shortly. I hear there's a board meeting, although I half suspect that you're going to be jumping on a plane to the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix and you just haven't told us. But just give us a sense, finally, of what happens. Obviously, the season ends, the final race of the season this weekend. Williams likely to wrap up 3rd place in the championship, which is a terrific result. What happens then from a Martini point of view? What kind of debriefing goes on in terms of speaking to the team and sort of hunkering down and preparing for 2015?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first thing we'll do is get together with the Williams team and have a cocktail to celebrate what, regardless of the outcome in Abu Dhabi, it's been an amazing season, and the team are feeling really proud. So we'll first of all celebrate and enjoy the season that we've had together. But we'll quickly move on to next season. The planning's already started. There's not much of a gap between seasons. And we'll do a debrief on what's worked, what hasn't worked. The thing that we take super seriously is measurement and evaluation of these things. So, I'll have to answer to my board around what did we invest, what did we set out to achieve, have we achieved it, yes or no? And that won't be qualitative, that's quantitative, and that's brand health moves, that's performance. And I'm pleased to say that in the markets that we've activated season 1, we've seen a marked improvement in brand performance. So I think it's going to be a reasonably straightforward conversation, although there's things we've got to learn from. We'll take that measurement evaluation, we'll look at what it means, and we'll get set. The hard work really starts for next season. It already has, and it'll continue through the Christmas period. And we'll want to make sure that we go bigger and better next season. We'll want to make sure that we've got a more integrated campaign than we had this season, and we'll want to make sure that Williams goes number 2 or 1 in next season, and I think they will.
Bold stuff. Listen, Andy, thank you so much for joining us. And
Terrific.
it's a great pleasure to have you with us. Andy Gibson.
Thanks, folks.
Let's just, I'm going to open this up to audience questions again in a moment, but let's just talk about that idea of measurement. It's obviously increasingly sophisticated. I think we can take that as a given. But Nick, for example, how is Huawei measuring each sponsorship in terms of what it's doing for the business?
Yeah, it's a really important point, and obviously we have a lot of internal stakeholders, quite a senior level, that attend various games and provide back subjective feedback. And within the marketing team, we're consistently looking for more robust statistical insight. Consequently, we're looking at the different clubs to provide us with evidence of their success, and it is often quite fragmented. There are respected research providers that work with each club, but what's important for me across the region and globally is to compare apples with apples. So we need to have some consistency across all of our club activations so that we can see where we're doing well and how we can improve. So, we go through a process of talking to these research providers, and, only recently we've made a decision to, try and standardise with a particular provider across, a significant number of our clubs. So that's on the quantitative side. Of course, internally we report on how we use our own assets and how we activate them, so we try to monitor that as closely as we can, make sure that we are using the assets as effectively as we can.
Tom, how about you? How is Unicef measuring it? Is it amount of money raised? Are you doing the traditional things that other big brands do in terms of measuring exposure, measuring engagement with the brand? How does it work?
Absolutely. So we do all of those things. A primary factor for us is the amount of income generated, but of course we recognise, as I said earlier, that that's not always the only, or certainly not the only thing, and often not the primary thing actually that we generate from our sporting relationships. I think there is certainly a need. We don't have big budgets to spend on measurement and evaluation in that area, but I think there is certainly opportunity for us to really get to grips with what this means to our supporters. And so some of the big relationships that we've had, I'm thinking about the Barcelona relationship, which is one of the things that people always talk to us about in relation to sport, is the recognition of Unicef on the shirt of Barcelona for those 5 years was just incredible in terms of brand awareness. However, we need to think more carefully about how we explain that, how we make sense of that to people. There were some misconceptions that came along with that about Unicef paying to be on the shirt, or what that actually meant. So I think in addition to understanding what people are taking from that, we need to do a lot more work in terms of sort of activating those relationships in a really powerful way. So we'll continue to look at the different ways in which we can do that through the variety of channels that we've got, and I think our measurements of that are becoming more sophisticated as we go on. We rely quite a bit on our partners in a lot of instances to support us with that.
You're amongst friends here. How did it feel? How did Unicef feel when, having had that fairly long relationship with FC Barcelona, the club then decided to take a corporate partner in that spot? Did that leave any sort of ill feeling? Was there a sense, because from the outside it perhaps looked as though there was an element of sort of paving the way for it. It was the first time that they'd had a shirt sponsor, and there was an element, a perception that it was somehow paving the way for a corporate partner, and this was a sort of a way in. I mean, was there any?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at it. In the one sense, disappointing after 5 years. We're still on the shirt, we should say. We're on the back of the shirt. We still receive a significant sum of money every year from Barcelona, and we still receive a huge amount of support from them in addition to that financial support to help us with our work. So it's by no means the end of the relationship. I think for us, as I say, what we probably didn't do enough of was activating that relationship. We haven't really been set up to activate a relationship like that in the way that we might have been. So I think, you know, we didn't make as much of it as we could, just that prime position. And I think, you know, aside from anything else, we've had it valued as what that was worth by the arrival of the Qatar Foundation and the 25 million or whatever it was per year. You know, we've actually understood the value of having that space for us, and that is immense. And so I think for us now, it's just about trying to understand how we unlock some of that value associated with those brands in the direction of Unicef. If we could just move a fraction of the loyalty and love for those brands towards Unicef and our cause, that would do amazing things for children, which is really a powerful opportunity for us.
Absolutely. Let's open it up for some questions. Raise your hand. I know lunchtime is approaching, but we've got three of perhaps the most interesting brands in sport with us. There is somebody. I've got a light shining in my eye. I can't see, but if somebody speaks, we'll know it's a question.
Ben Barker from TVC Sports. Particularly sort of looking at two quite different price points from a Nissan to a Huawei phone. How does your use of content particularly differ, given that ultimately you're looking for a purchase of £20,000 plus compared to a £300-400 maximum commitment for a phone? Does it affect how you use content and how you drive your social activation online?
Who wants to start, the smartphone or the car?
I'll dive in, but for me it doesn't. I don't think it's my job to sell cars. Let me be blunt about that. I have a phenomenal franchise dealer network who do a great job of selling a phenomenal number of Nissans every day, and if I tried to do that, I'd probably fail dismally. My job is really to create a little bit of passion and affinity for Nissan as a brand, and I think if you think about it, if you buy a car, if there's car buyers in the audience, you don't change your car every year. So there is a difference in terms of the purchase cycle. The average cycle in Europe at the moment is between 6 and 8 years, let's say. So I'm not trying on a daily basis to get someone to buy a car. When they're in the period of buying, hopefully, if I've done my job right, they'll have Nissan at the top of mind. They'll have a better feeling about Nissan than they had before, perhaps when they bought their previous car. And then they'll look at our brand, and if our product is strong enough against the competition, and our dealers do the right job, then we'll be fine, and we'll deliver on our business objectives. And I try and look at it in that way. So therefore, from a content perspective, I want to try and create fans, create people that will fall in love. Might be a little bit of a stretch, but really have that stronger affinity for us with the content we create and with the way we're trying to activate the UEFA Champions League. Really focusing on something that they care about rather than just pushing our message out. So maybe in that respect, I don't think we're necessarily different, but I'll pass over the question.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that, you know, there is a difference. That, you know, if I'm doing my job right, then we're going to see sales uplift. You know, there is a big difference between cars and phones, but ultimately, you know, we are very focused on driving product consideration through digital activation of our assets. And you know, we have a significant proportion of our devices that are sold in the open market, so the consumer can go straight through and purchase that product online. But that said, you know, brand awareness is still an important you know, KPI for us in particular markets. So it does vary, and there is a certain amount of exposure that we can get from our football assets to drive that awareness, improve our brand perception, but certainly one of our marketing objectives is product consideration, and we use our digital channels to do that.
Any other questions for our panel? Got one just in the aisle here.
Hi, Simon Rhines, IMR. Question for Nick. On the whole, your sponsorships, I think, are secondary deals. And as a kind of new brand to a lot of people and a challenger brand, did you not consider it might be more worthwhile going for one big primary deal?
That's an interesting question. Obviously, with most club deals, there are certain tiers of entry. What we thought was important for us was to become the smartphone partner and or the technology partner of those clubs. So, we didn't have to write as huge a check as necessary in order to achieve that with most of our partners. That said, we do see a value in being a shirt sponsor, and that certainly seems to be a trend in terms of the sponsorship deals that we're doing, with Galatasaray recently, and even more recently the Santos deal in Brazil, and of course Atletico Madrid at the end of the summer. So I would say that from a business culture point of view, we like to take a step-by-step approach. That's the Huawei way of working, if you like. So we were never going to dive straight in. We were going to see what works best, and once the train leaves the building, the momentum will build. So that's probably the direction we're going in.
Final question then, to all of you. Give me the name of one brand that's not your own and not a client that, close that loophole, that you particularly admire, whether it's through a specific sponsorship that they're engaged with at the moment, or just generally about how they go about their sponsorship business. I know you mentioned a couple in the presentation earlier on.
Yeah, I think going beyond the two I mentioned, Heineken and VW, trying to look perhaps elsewhere. Again, perhaps staying with Heineken in a different way. So I'll mention them, but with a different sport, is what Heineken did with rugby and the Heineken Cup over the last, quite a few years now. So away from their Heineken houses and what they've done to activate the sport, they really created a level of premiumness within a tournament, and it was brought not just by the quality of the rugby that was being played, but with the way Heineken carried out themselves and they marketed themselves, and they became synonymous with the rugby tournament. So that today, I sat in a charity event last week with Mark, talking to an awful lot of passionate rugby people, and not one of us was calling it by the proper name, the new tournament name. Everyone was still calling it the Heineken Cup, and I think rugby fans miss that Heineken Cup, and because they're now missed, I think I admire them for that, and really have that sort of affinity for them as a brand because of that.
I'd go for, it's probably one that a lot of people quote, but I just think P&G with the Olympics is absolutely brilliant. Carving out a role in a really cluttered landscape, a very single-minded role. It's a proud sponsor of Mums, perfectly linked to many products. They've got a huge amount of products in that partnership, but it's a brilliant positioning that could allow them to then have localised campaigns. So I just thought it was perfect in terms of owning an area. And certainly all the research we did around the Olympics, where you had some brands who tried to activate a little bit of everything, got lost, and P&G came through absolutely brilliantly, and I thought that was a very good one.
Tom?
Well, it's slightly different for us, I suppose. Yeah. I think we look at some of the major sporting events and look at the narrative that those events are trying to express. So certainly for us, Glasgow 2014 was really interesting in terms of the narrative that they created around the city and the external exposure of that city to a Commonwealth-wide audience, and our ability to connect into that messaging of an outward-looking and inspiring young city. I think they've got this phrase, people make Glasgow, that they were really looking to activate in the city and internationally. So I think I was very impressed with how they did that and incorporated us into that message.
And Nick, the last word?
Puma, to be honest. They sponsor two clubs, Borussia Dortmund and Arsenal. Will be with them at the upcoming Champions League game at the Emirates next week. And we see them as, like us, very much a challenger brand, looking to take down the top two. And we like the way that their presence, particularly the way that they activated around the World Cup with their boots, won a lot of plaudits. And we're open to new ideas, new disruptive ways of engaging with consumers that are thinking about an alternative to the top two. One example would be the way that we preloaded their app within our Arsenal Edition P7 phone this year. So we're constantly thinking about ways that we can work with partners of those clubs to move both our brands forward.
Excellent. Well, thank you one and all for being here and being part of the panel. That is very nearly lunch, but I must say before lunch that this afternoon we're going to go a little bit deeper still into some of these issues. We're going to split off into a couple of different panel sessions here or in the media centre on issues like real-time marketing, digital platforms and the world of data as well. So some good stuff coming up this afternoon. Do stick around for that. And at 4:15, as I mentioned earlier, we have the likes of Manchester United and Atletico Madrid on a panel which will be based around some of the world's biggest sports teams and how they operate in this sector. Lunch is in the long room, and I must remind you that it's a jacket and tie only affair, but the lunch will be good. The lunch is sponsored by Omnigon. If you don't have a tie with you, I believe we do have some spares, and indeed we've got a team of people ready to escort you over to the long room, and we'll reconvene at about 2:15. Thank you very much.